Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today and always by my friend who he really blends in with the crowd, if you know what I mean.
I don't know what you mean.
I don't know what I mean either, because you really don't. I mean, you really stand out amongst the crowd. It's your height. It's the shock of white hair. I was just looking for a way to connect you to our wonderful guest today, James Saxon of Compass Box, the blenders.
Coming in hot here.
The whiskey makers.
Hoofty. The paint's barely dry on the set around us, and you've already got to our subject today.
That's what we call a pro move, Jason.
Is it?
It's something. We call it something.
It is definitely something.
Yeah, so, yes, today's guest is James Saxon. I wanted to bring something up here before we talked about James Saxon. Last episode,
Understood.
You and I wouldn't say we complained, but we made an announcement. And the announcement was, hey, it looks like no one's emailing us anymore. Maybe.
Hello, is anybody out there? Is anybody listening? Hello.
And so we invited people to email us. And wouldn't you know, we found out two things. Thing number one, our questions at One Nation Under Whiskey email is on the fritz, and we hope to have it sorted shortly. And we found that out because a number of people emailed us at info@singlecasknation.com to let us know that there was an issue with the other email, and they sent us some questions.
Huzzah. Huzzah. Is your intention to lead with a question since it has been so long?
I thought it might be a good way to, or a good thing to do, right? It's something you introduced, and why not resurrect it?
Oh, yeah, I love that idea.
So I'm going to start off with a quick and short one. And this one comes from a Connecticut Nation member, guy by the name of Martin Coburn, a.k.a. Marty, who, by the way, found out about the Nation through my mother. So there you go.
Nice.
Thanks, Mom.
Nice. Yeah, when we say we started out small, we clearly started out small. We've got personal friends in the Nation. We've got mothers making recommendations. My mother-in-law has made recommendations to people. So.
That's true. Right.
Tamara has worked diligently. Anyway, it's an incomplete Joshua Hatton list. Moving on.
Nope, keep listening. And so this is actually an answer to your question.
Oh, fancy.
And he just says, okay, here's an email. A baby squirrel can be called pup, kitten, or kit. But Joshua, you're still killing them.
To be clear, no squirrels were injured in the recording of our last episode.
Yeah, just a quick update. Firstly, Marty, thank you so much for emailing. Secondly, I've got to say, I don't think I'm killing these squirrels. What I've noticed, and things are still happening, but what I've noticed is that these squirrels are leaving the roof. They can jump onto my tree that I've trimmed, but they can't jump off the tree back onto the roof. So we're starting to see an exodus. And so, much like our people, we traveled 40 years to go from Egypt to the Promised Land. It could take time for these squirrels to leave Mitzrayim.
And all those squirrels are busy saying next year in New Haven.
But Marty, thank you for emailing. Thank you for your concern.
Yeah, kits and kittens and pups. Yeah, what did we call them on the last episode?
I think you referred to them potentially as pups.
No. Did I?
I think so. And I said kitten just being silly. But he...
What?
I did. And he says he called a pup a kitten or a kit. And I'm not even going to search the internet to see if he is telling the truth. I'm just going to assume that he's truthing.
All right. That's good. That was short and to the point. I liked it. What's next?
There's another email here, and this one's from our friend Ian Bruce, who's emailed in before. And listen, we've got emails from the Ice Cream Man, from Nick Frangipagna, from Ian Bruce, from Keith Duncan, from a number of people.
Very nice.
Tom Jodelka, right? If you remember that name.
Nice. Wonderful.
Right? So this one, there's actually a number of questions on this email, but I just want to introduce one of them because I think about this somewhat often myself. And so he said, and I love the intro here, and I think Steve Hawley will love this intro. And he says, "G'day, Jason, Jess, Joshua, and Steve."
Ta-da! He's one of the gang.
I've been squirreling away a few questions. See what he did there? And so happy to contribute to a front-loading email. So, see?
Here we are, front-loading.
And so he says, firstly, with the podcast now reaching season 8, who out in both the whiskey and non-whiskey world would each of you still like to have on as a guest?
My non-whiskey people are people that I know from the American food scene, or people I'm familiar with. I'm not claiming to be friends with them. But there's Sam Sifton, who's the food editor for the New York Times. I would love to sit down and talk to him. He seems pretty cool. There's Ruth Reichel, who has been in the American food scene since the 1960s, 1970s. Former food critic for the New York Times, but also for the LA Times. Former editor of Gourmet magazine before it was shuttered. And just has lived a life, and her books are absolutely phenomenal. Nice. And so, yeah, she's definitely on my list as well. So someone who was part of a Great Isle Swim episode, but not somebody we've actually sat down and built a dedicated episode around, but Jackie Thompson at Ardbeg, and the life that she has lived at Ardbeg is phenomenal. And she's one person I know people ask you all the time and Jess all the time, like, when I go to Islay, what should I do, or what should I see, or what is extra special? Yeah. I always say, if you can make it to Ardbeg, if you can have some lunch in the cafe and you have a chance to say hi to Jackie Thompson, like, those to me are part experiences of going to Islay. And the fact we haven't sat down with her and dedicated an episode to her, I think we've made an error there. And so I would like to remedy that someday. I was also saying this to somebody the other day. Okay. When were you and I last on Islay?
Oofty. When were we last on Islay together?
And that's the thing, right? Because you had your Impex tour.
Yeah.
When were we last on Islay together?
We were last on Islay together during the Phage in 2019.
That's it. That's exactly. That's 5 years, almost to the day.
5 years?
That's insane.
5 years, Jason. How is that even possible?
Yeah. So I think we should sit down together. We should make a little plan of people that we want to see in person and who have never been on the podcast or never had the spotlight on the podcast and remedy some of that. So there you go. I'm going to leave my answer there. What's some of your answers, Joshua?
Well, for my non-whiskey guests, as you might imagine, the people that I think about the most, read about the most, are musicians. And so I've been, I grew up, this is going to sound funny. It's weird. As soon as I start talking about this, it almost sounds like it's a guilty pleasure because most people would make a funny face when I say this. But here, I'm going to go with it. Geddy Lee of Rush. See what I mean? I think that Rush is one of those bands that people are almost scared to say they love. They really are. They secretly in huddled corners listen to them and just like, oh man, are they going from 5/4 to 7/8 to, oh man, and listen to Geddy Lee's vocals. Like, more people love Geddy Lee's vocals than they like to admit. And I recently read a biography of his an autobiography of his memoirs from his early days up until, him becoming a grandfather. And I think that his life is really intriguing, and he just seems like a cool dude to talk to. And just to understand what it's like to follow your passion, like leaving high school to start a band, and becoming one of the biggest rock bands of all times that people are scared to say they love them, So I love Rush. Boom, there it is. Another one, and this one's kind of tricky. I'm desperate to talk with Ian Mackay, who started the band Minor Threat. He was in the band Fugazi and Embrace. Corky is his latest band. He started Discord Records, a lot of great like DC punk and hardcore bands through that label. And I think there's so much history there. And I love the way he thinks not just about music, but about music's interaction with people and how people place it within their lives. And
sure.
And
we talk about whiskey context all the time, so to hear musical context I think fits with an area of fascination for us.
And here's where it becomes a bit tricky is, I'm sure a number of our listeners have heard the term straight edge, right? This was a movement within the punk and hardcore scene of people deciding that they're not going to drink, they're not going to do drugs, they're going to live a clean life. Ian Mackay's song Straight Edge in Minor Threat kicked that off. Like, he's the reason for it, and he remains clean to this day from like the early 80s until now. And so it'd be weird having a conversation with someone like that on a whiskey podcast.
But you would get to ask him the question of whether he would enjoy whiskey if it contained no alcohol.
I'm calling him up today. Boom.
We have one question for you. Could you answer this, please? Thank you. We've dedicated an entire episode to you.
It's as far as whiskey goes, there's someone whose whiskey career I've followed quite a bit since my own introduction to whiskey, and that's Annabelle Meikle.
Of course.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? She was with Glenmorangie, LVMH, SMWH, SMWS. And now she's with the Keepers of the Quaich, right? You know, and she really is a force and someone I find synonymous with Scotch whiskey, and I just think she's got so many great stories to be telling about whiskey. So maybe we can work to do a bit of a 1-2 punch. Let's get two absolute whiskey legends on our podcast of Jackie Thompson of Ardbeg and Annabelle Meikle of Keepers of the Quaich. There you go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm absolutely down for that.
That's a goal. I like that. Cool. Well, Ian, we'll get to your other questions at another time. And the rest of you that have written in, thank you again for writing in.
Yeah, this is very cool. Glad we're back in contact with the listenership.
Right?
After it felt like we were getting the cold shoulder for a little bit there.
So we'll get that email fixed. I'll be sure to update people on the squirrels as that goes along, as Squirrelgate continues. Jason, before we introduce James Saxon to the podcast, and I don't know if there was something you wanted to say.
I wanted to set a challenge because I love the fact that you're able to go through some of those emails there and say, here's the ice cream man, and using some of those nicknames that we've had there. I would love for somebody who's been listening but never written in to just send us a note and just let us know how they're doing. Just send a little note to info@singlecasknation.com and just say, long-time listener, first-time writer, or short-time listener, first-time writer. Just to send us a new name. Let us throw a new name out there into the world. That would be really cool as well, because as much as we obviously love hearing from the well-established, it's also nice to open that door and invite new people in as well. So, info@singlecasknation.com. Send us a note. That's all I wanted to say, Joshua.
Cool. Well, with all that said, let's hand it over to our conversation with Compass Box's whiskey making director of whiskey making.
We clarify in the next few minutes.
James Saxon. James Saxon, I've been looking for a reason to open this bottle of Compass Box Magic Cask, who by the way, was sold to me by Anthony Levinson from Roma Wines, by the way, or previously from Roma Wines. So I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and having with us our first true full episode with you. We've done a half episode with you, but and you're the only person to get a half episode. So now you're going to be above everybody else with the 1.5.
I do like my decimals.
I want to thank you. What's that? You like your? But thank you for coming on, and thank you for giving me an excuse to open this bottle.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Joshua, Jason, thank you so much for having me back. Yes, that half episode was really fun. Shame we're not in the same room this time. But yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think why. We obviously had established our Westland April Fools as an annual half episode, which kind of fit with the conceit of a Westland April Fools. But for you, we were in town, we were at the Compass Box offices. Ostensibly, we were there to interview John Glaser, but it was also a wonderful opportunity to interview you as you were just getting your feet. I don't know which tortured metaphor to go with here, but, under the desk, in the door, wet. I don't even know where to take it. But you started in 2019, and now in 2024, you're the lead whiskey maker. I've seen you described as whiskey director. What's now on the business card, James?
Yeah, the business cards, Jason. I'm still waiting for those, to be honest. I think
you'll be waiting a while.
Somewhere. Yeah, I think we're going virtual now. But yeah, you're right. I started 2019 with Compass Box, working under John as assistant whiskey maker. By the time we got to sort of mid 2020, the assistant came off. And then roughly midway through 2022, some extra responsibilities came my way. I'm thinking mainly inventory stuff, so new spreadsheets.
That's my follow-up.
And then, with the changes that we've seen, John stepping back, the title now is Whiskymaking Director.
Whisky-making director. Wow. And you will address him as such, Joshua Hatton.
From here on out.
I'm happy with Sir. Sir is fine.
So you did. You kind of led into the follow-up, which is, as assistant whiskey maker, was there more whiskey making involved? And as lead whiskey maker, whiskey making director of whiskey making, is there now more spreadsheets involved? What has that evolution looked like for you?
Good question. I wouldn't say, because I'm having to give an answer here which doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of a clock. There is the same amount of whiskey making happening, believe it or not. It's just there's a lot of now extra stuff on top. So I don't know. I've definitely gotten, I think, more efficient in terms of the different things that we're doing. But the way Compass Box has always been is it's constant evolution and change. So just as you sort of nail down one area, and I wouldn't say I've nailed down whiskey making. It's a constant process of learning. But yeah, the more you get comfortable with one process, the more a new one pops up, and you just sort of get a little bit better at squeezing a bit more in.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the spreadsheeting as much as the whiskey making? Is it simply a different endeavor, simply uses a different part of the brain, or are there are there points of commonality there?
Yeah, you should see my XL merchandise. It's dotted all around the house, not within view. No, it is satisfying when you have a recipe and, you know, I'm not the one building these models. Our CFO Philip is whatever a beyond whiz is at XL. Mm-hmm. So he's putting together these models. He's ex-William Grant, so he knows how these things sort of need to be structured. And obviously, as of 2022, when new investment came in, we had a chance to buy a big chunk of lots of lovely whiskey. And so being able to forecast that out, understand what we need it for, and actually having it all marry up, our ideal recipe from whiskey making side, and then just what we literally have in the warehouses, having that match up is really, really nice. So, yeah, when it matches up. But yeah, I've spent basically the last 3 and a bit weeks working very closely with Philip, putting numbers into spreadsheets, and yeah, that is satisfying. The challenge, of course, is it is a different part of the brain, as you mentioned, Jason, but it's not always easy to mix and match, and a big challenge for me going forward, and something I've been very clear with, with my boss now, is how do I, James, find the right space to be creative, because that's ultimately what I prefer. It's lovely being able to give the business confidence in what we're sitting on, but it's even better when we are, creating concepts which just get everybody in the office excited, and then that if people in the office are chatting about it, then our fans around the world are going to love it.
Very nice.
That leads us into a question that I had. It's a 2-part question, so hopefully I ask it the right way. When I think of your classic blends, your Johnny Red, your Johnny Black, your Dewar's, Chivas, and so on, and think of those blends over the years, you can taste from sort of decade to decade, sometimes subtle changes and sometimes significant changes. Maybe they change a direction in what they want that blend to be doing for whatever they deem the market to need. And so my question for you is, because you brought up some significant investment in 2022, being able to buy more stock, what part of either that or you taking the helm as lead whiskey maker could help dictate any potential changes? Like, do you find yourself as a steward of the Compass Box blends and need to carry them forward? Do you find yourself having to finesse them? Should your inventories change while still maintaining that stewardship? Like, how do you juggle those two ideas?
It's kind of all of the above, really. We've always had, John, I know, has always had this belief, and working with him, it's something that I carry forward. Is if there's an opportunity to make a whiskey taste better, and it's not going to, drastically impact your inventory or be unrepeatable, you should do it. And so I think about whiskies like Glasgow Blend is a really great example, where you get a little bit better at managing the cask interaction. So, most of the whiskey we use on the sherried side, it's a 1 or 2 or even slightly longer finish in Oloroso. And so that, as a blender, is giving you a really sort of stable base. And again, the right casks are chosen for the right spirit. That spirit is already, pretty mature. It's getting towards 10 years old in the vast majority of recent bottlings, and so you're making sure that you can. And this is all for Jason's benefit. I know how much he loves his Glasgow blend.
I'm smiling from
see behind the curtain. So it's really about isolating the individual components and tweaking the ones that can make the biggest difference in a positive way. And so we try and do that as much as possible. And we have some new things coming out this year. And John and I were working on those. And he was like, this particular batch, it's good. But I think back to John was telling the story about Oak Cross. And he said, Oak Cross got better. We weren't necessarily consciously tweaking the recipe, but as the French oak program really sort of bedded in, as you were sort of finessing size of batches to what you have, he was like, yeah, Oak Cross definitely got better as it improved or as it aged, as a product rather than necessarily as stock. And so we see the same thing. We see there are constantly being opportunities to change things. So yeah, there's a really exciting little project that started a couple of weeks ago, officially at least. Whisky went into a cask, and it's changing or looking again potentially at one of the components of Orchard House. So one of the whiskies that I helped sort of bring to market for the core range at least. And it could be quite subtle. We don't know the impact, but there's something within me that's saying if we switch out Oloroso for whatever this cask type is, we could get something really quite bright and red curranty, and again, just really fitting with the style.
Okay, I like that approach of if we can make it better, let's make it better, which seems counterintuitive to the general idea of blends, where the focus is less on improved quality of flavor, quality of experience, but ensuring that consistency for as long as possible. Has that been just a core ethos of Compass Box since the beginning? Consistency isn't king; it's quality first.
We definitely don't strive for absolute consistency in the way that the big brands do, because we simply don't have the supply that they can rely on to sort of iron out. And as you say, decade to decade, you'll see differences. And this is what, we've just finished a limited edition series called the Extinct Blends Quartet, and that's basically us pointing out that these things do change, guys. But that's okay, because whiskey, and this is one of the main reasons I love blends in particular, is blended whiskey is a bit of it's a barometer, it's a sense check, what's the temperature of the industry right now? And actually, it's not just right now in terms of sales and markets, but it's also 10, 12, however long ago you needed to have produced it. What were the production conditions like then? And so actually tasting a blend, Johnny Walker Black is a great example, but another blend I love, something like Cutty Sark, you can taste that and you can understand people's thinking, either the blenders or even the marketeers. And I know that the M word gets a lot of abuse, but actually, this is a vital part of bringing Scotch whisky to more people and making it relevant. And blends, it's tying all of these different strands together to create something, that fits the palate, the price point of a certain, subset of people wherever they are in the world. And that for me is just fascinating. And whiskey changes. We are quite open about that. We don't strive for consistency. If you try a Glasgow blend from this year versus 2 years ago, you will see some change. But above all, what is Glasgow blend? Well, Glasgow blend is a burly, bold, sherry and peat influenced blended Scotch. So long as you have those components going on, the exact interplay between them can be quite different. I sort of sometimes think about it, it's like a song, a melody. That it's I don't know, Thunderstruck by AC/DC, whether it's electric guitar or a banjo, it's the same thing. But just sort of thinking of some very good sort of hillbilly rock covers of AC/DC.
AC Dixie.
The ones. So that's how we look at it. Obviously, we want to keep a certain intensity, but as I say, the relative flow and texture, that can evolve. But so long as people buy a Glasgow blend and they're getting that sort of Williamson-y smoke and they're getting some of that punchy sherry, then we think we've done our jobs.
Well done sliding Williamson-y right in there. That was nicely done. A South Shore Isla distillery.
Yes.
Yes, I'm not going to say too much on that brand right now. We're kind of talking around something that I want to ask about today, which is in our last episode with Chris Riesbeck of Found North, he said something wonderfully provocative, and he said it and we discussed it, and I said, we're going to have James Saxon on here from Compass Box, and I'm going to put this in front of him as well. And I've known you since your St Andrews days, and you've always struck me as a very thoughtful chap. And so I think this is going to be right up your alley. And so Chris had said, experimentation is not the same as innovation. And given what Compass Box is most known for, I was curious if you have all contemplated that within Compass Box HQ, or if it's just simply something you've contemplated along the way. But when you hear experimentation is not the same as innovation, what are your thoughts?
It's a big topic.
Yes, it is. Take your time. Really feel it out. Just relax into it.
Explore the space. Yeah.
And this is just between us three, right? No one else is going to be listening to this.
Absolutely.
No one's listening at all. Okay, just really quickly, all 40,000 listeners, just shut your stereo off and just give us 5 minutes, maybe 10.
Yeah. We have thought about this a lot at Compass Box because, as you say, we came out of the blocks. John came out of the blocks. There was still maybe like 5 or 6 people in the company when, a lot of the big changes occurred. And I think it's interesting if you ask John, and obviously John's not here, but there are debates to be had about what was in John's mind. Was John trying to be innovative? Or did John have a particular vision for Scotch whisky, which was different to what he was experiencing in the moment? And I do feel like it was more the latter. I think there is something really powerful, but also something really quite insular about experimentation. And so, whether it's the people from distilleries and blenders that you interview on One Nation Under Whisky, they all sort of touch on this, I think, which is, we're seeing how our spirit responds to Spanish oak, Pedro Jimenez. And nobody, at least the way the word is used at the minute, nobody is going to look at that as innovative. But for you, that experimentation is helping to refine your offering. It's helping to establish what your style is. And I think everybody having their own style and working out what works best for them is only going to benefit the entire whisky world. And so it depends on experimentation for what purpose. If you're simply trying to get something out there for which you can say the first X, well, that's probably not going to be as harmonious as saying, well, we have been experimenting with all sorts of stuff. And actually, we could have said that we were the first to use this particular cask type. And I'm sure you're the same, I get emails from cask suppliers and there's all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff on there. Should all of it end up in a bottle having, tasted some Scotch whisky for 2 months? Probably not. But again, I think producers who care about finding their style will be filling these casks, will be checking it out. But if it doesn't work, they're not going to be releasing it. And so what you, the drinker, are experiencing is stuff that somebody at that distillery, at that blending house, whatever, has said, this gives you a better flavour. And I know for me, and I think the Compass Box mission, certainly up to this point, has always been: is it a better flavour? If so, we're gonna bring it to market. Obviously, if you're in sales, it's a really powerful message if you can twist someone's ear or just sort of redirect them with X and Y and Z. But innovation is, I think it has to be more than the race to use a cask for the first time. Because what you're dealing with there is, whether it's full maturation or a finish, it doesn't matter. Like all of these things, all of these processes have sort of been done before. It's just, no one has used this obscure Tasmanian orange wine to season a cask before, for example. And it could be delicious, and that's fine. I just think sometimes the industry, I sense that the industry tries really hard to perform innovation to itself. And how relevant is that to the end drinker For sure, there's going to be people who love that novelty, and maybe that PR headline cuts through. But no, I think certainly at Compass Box, whether you look at Spice Tree or the Transparency campaign, it wasn't really just about what whiskey interacted with what cask. It was, what's the wider purpose? Where are we trying to get to? Where do we want whiskey to be? And that is always, for me, the most inspiring aspect of it. And so we're seeing so many more collaborations coming out. And again, collaboration in and of itself, not innovative, but the stories you can tell there are true, usually. They are tinged with all sorts of different colours and experiences and desires and fan bases. And so you end up with something new. And innovation and something new, they can often be interchanged in the language, but I think they are different. It's sort of new because, or new why. Yeah, new why. Let's go with that. That's sort of that's how we're trying to think about it going forward. There's certain things that we can do process-wise as Compass Box, and there's certain things, obviously distilling, that we can't. So we have a narrow way that we can influence process, but we have a huge way that we can influence storytelling and collaboration and ideas. And that's, for us, I think, the much more exciting territory to explore. But everyone has to do what works for them.
I knew you would give it a good, thoughtful response. That was spot on, James. It reminds me of that old saw: experimentation for the sake of experimentation isn't worth much. And it seems the way you're describing it here, this idea of innovation is somehow advancing the industry or the category, or at least your brand, right? And I like your inclusion of why. Right. Like I think that needs to be a guiding principle. And if the answer to that is simply because we're the first ones to do it, it might need a little bit of deeper thought attached to it. So yeah, I love what you're saying on it. And again, to Chris for bringing that to us in his episode. I loved it when he said it, and I love your extension on it today, James.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just say that exactly. It's like if experimentation for the sake of experimentation, and if you love experimentation, then great. But it's always going to be more meaningful, I think, when there is something that is inherently interesting to you that you want to pick away at. You want to unpick, excavate. You want to find some new angle to, because that's going to take you down some really interesting rabbit holes where it might have started with one experiment in a warehouse, but it takes you to potentially something really quite interesting. And so if you're able to take that through the lenses of, however big your company is, and you can deliver that to the whiskey drinker, that's going to be something that, if you end up at a whiskey festival or, you've got to do some online tastings or whatever, you're never going to get tired of expressing that and sharing that. And I think people will respond to that because they sense the sincerity there.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Authenticity is something we talk around here a lot. So sincerity, I think, goes hand in glove with authenticity.
I think so.
Jeez, there's another one. There's another discussing point. Does it indeed? Who knows? Moving on. Joshua.
We may have asked this question previously of John, or maybe of yourself. I didn't do the homework in listening back to our two previous Compass Box conversations. But I'd love, even if we had asked it previously, it'd be good to reiterate your answer here. And I'd love to know a bit more about your blending process and some of the intentionality behind it, and how you meld those flavors together. Just really quickly, when Jason and I are tasting casks, if it's a rum and that rum is 77% alcohol, and we know we need to bring it down to something that won't light people's faces on fire, we'll put some water in there and we'll let it sit for a little while, because we know the water needs to marry with the liquid for a little bit, right? It's a very simple idea. So with that idea in mind, how do you approach blending so that whatever you're doing becomes a harmonious final product?
we've recently moved offices, and there's some blank space above the window in my new blending room. No more shall I be chased by the aromas of fish curry coming from the microwave in the kitchen. There's a very very tight door between me and that microwave. But there is a lovely blank space above the window, and I've been thinking along exactly these lines. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to rehearse my brief for the designer, because there are a few stages, and I think sometimes it can be quite mysterious. And Compass Box, we love our transparency. We want to share as much as we can, and so the things that we do, things that have been developed over time, we're still tweaking and we're still looking at. It's always an evolutionary step. But in terms of me coming in wanting to create a new blend for whether it's what we call our bespokes for a particular customer somewhere in the world, if it's a new limited edition, it might be a new core range product. I always start with the samples. And so again, we're based in London. We don't have our own warehouse, so I am throughout the year requesting samples from our warehouse partners. They come down to the office, and so I will dip in and out, see what's interesting, see where the quality is, and sometimes I'll go, I've created something in my mind. It has this kind of profile. I think I'm going to use these stocks. I then get into the blending room and start playing around with measuring cylinders. So it's taking as much as possible, it's finding a lead whiskey. So a whiskey with a certain characteristic, and that could be a certain aroma. It could be length on the palate. It could be texture, all sorts of different things. But that's what I want to hero. And this is how I think it's going to work with ultimately the bigger project. Then it's finding those accents, those little embellishments, the garnishes, if you like, think about it from like a cooking perspective. And those garnishes can change quite radically as you actually get stuff into glass. But I will create what we call a prototype blend, usually about 50 milliliters, and reduce it with sort of treated water that we have in the room. Leaves that for anywhere to 24 hours a week. Minimum 24 hours is kind of what we look at, and then it's an opportunity for me to taste that with John or with anybody else in the office who's interested. Fortunately, we do have quite a few people who are interested, so getting their feedback is really useful. Sometimes we might have like a competitor product as well, and it's like we're not trying to sort of copy the flavors, but it's like, okay, this is something that potentially another whiskey drinker is going to be accessing at this price point that we're imagining. So how is that delivering its flavors, and how can we sort of, as best as we can, outperform that a little bit, or how can we tweak off some characteristics that are maybe getting in the way of what we really want? And so giving about 24 hours to a week's time for everything to just sort of knit together definitely helps. And then ultimately, though, it's sort of looking through a glass darkly. It's a very inexact science, because once that whiskey goes through a bottling hall, as I'm sure you guys know, I'd love to hear any stories you have opening up a bottle of whatever and going, wait, we picked this? Because that bottle shock, goes through the filters, gets a lot of oxygen put into it. It's obviously in a different kind of glass. The temperature variations, like whiskies are a robust drink, and ultimately it does come around again. But certainly for us, we know that once something has been bottled, it tends to brighten it up a little bit. So you have a little bit less of the bottom end. Again, thinking about it musically, there's a little bit more treble, a little bit more twang, but it's still ultimately the same whiskey. So, we know that if a sample in the blending room is coming through a little bit too sort of fuzzy, buzzy, bottom endy, we'll try and tweak it there and then. But we know that actually the bottling process is gonna help that. If we start off with something in the blending room that's already too light and wispy, it's probably not going to have the kind of richness and generosity that we want a Compass Box to have when it actually gets to the bottle and the final drinker.
Interesting.
Wow, I love that. Prior to bottling, and so blend creation, at any point are your blends married in cask? I know you mentioned talking about using Oloroso, Spanish Oloroso for 2 years for this or that. Is that for the individual components? Is that to bring everything together after you've blended it? Is it both?
Yeah, we try to, for all of our core range whiskies, as we refer to them at the minute, they will all be vatted in Glasgow, and then they will return to cask to marry. Now, those casks are the casks that the individual components came from. So imagine you've got 10 casks, 4 Clynelish, 4 Linkwood, 2 Kalila. The final blend is going back into those individual casks. And that could be anywhere from like 2 months to, we're bottling some Peat Monsters recently that have been in marrying for 2 years. So it's always a case of, we vat, as we call it, to the volume forecasts. And so sometimes, as I'm sure it will surprise no one who's a lover of spirits to know that last year and last 18 months have been more challenging. And so we maybe haven't got through the Peat Monster that we were expecting to. And so as that marries in cask, we're actually noticing that it's got a little bit less of the peat profile. So we might have some older vattings, I'm thinking like 2021 vatting of Peat Monster. And actually it's very important that we then blend that with some of the more recent vattings so that, you now have a more mature, elegant Peat Monster, but you still want a little bit of that growl of the smoke. So making sure that you're not just depleting all of those old casks, you're tweaking to make sure that the Peat Monster that people know and love and expect, it, as we touched on earlier, it will change bottling to bottling, year to year, but there should definitely be a pronounced peat presence. And so we got some samples through of longer married Peat Monster, and it's like delicious but a bit softer on the peat. So let's make sure we've got some younger vattings going in. So everything's married in cask. Timing varies, and then when we understand how much we need to bottle, we get the right amount of casks with the right amount of liquid. That goes to the bottling hall reduction bottling. But the marrying process, it's really, really important. We found as Orchard House should always be bright and zesty, but I think the first 3 or 4 probably major bottlings that we did, certainly when the bottle was straight open, for some people, even at 46%, it was really quite sort of potent, and that kind of sharpness could be a little bit too much. And so, as I say, once that bottle goes down, the extra oxygen kind of rounds out that characteristic. But we found that, vatting the liquid, reducing it to 52% ABV, so like an initial reduction in cask, leave that, and then bottling that, and we're noticing that sort of palate heat really has been tamed. So the marrying process for us is vital, and so all of our core range products are married.
I had a different question in the chamber for you, but knowingly or unknowingly, you have just waded into the neck pour controversy. And you, James Saxon, seem to be suggesting that the neck pour issue, problem, situation, how would you define a bottle improving to a certain point as you work your way through it and that oxygen is getting introduced? I just want to be clear here. Are you saying we should pour the neck pour down the sink?
Guys, you should have warned me that I was wandering into a minefield. No, you absolutely should not be pouring your neck pour down the drain. That's not why it's 75 CL in the US and 70 in the rest of the world. It's like we know our American fans are just going to pull that first bit out. That's not why. No, it just like with wine, like with anything, get it in your glass for a little bit longer. It's just one of those situations where the more time you spend with a whiskey, the more you do start to see some of those differences. And one of my absolute favorite bloggers, Mr. My Annoying Opinions, based out of Minnesota, I think, he does like to re-review his whiskies, and so he'll tell you from 1/3 down, this is it, from 2/3 down. But basically the neck pour is the same as everything else in that bottle. So if you pour the neck pour out, everything else is still at that level. You know, it's a puzzling one. So yeah, don't waste the whiskey. Just if you are finding it, and this, you know, it's an if. It doesn't happen to all whiskies in all cases, but if you are finding it's a little bit peppery, a little bit, kind of too exuberant, then just put it in your glass. If you've got the time, you know, even chill the glass first a little bit. Just allows some of that.
He's just wading from controversy to controversy. Holy moly!
But these are just things that, and I'm not a scientist. That's the first thing I need to say. But I should have led with that, shouldn't I? I am not a scientist, but I am someone who likes to sort of finesse their drinking experience. So yeah, there's some bottles I open, and you know, I won't mention any names, but there was one from an IB. A distillery that I really admire, and it could have just been the age, it could have been the strength, it could have been the cask type, but throughout that whole bottle I kept expecting it to just kind of blossom, or at least show a slightly different dimension, and unfortunately it didn't. And it was a solid 6 out of 10 whiskey. I'd hoped it could get to like 7.5, and so I was trying all sorts of different things just to sort of coax it out, to relax it a little bit, and I think that's it. It's just a bit of oxygen, a bit of breathing room, just like for humans. It can usually bring about a positive change.
Well, it speaks to something that Josh and I have been talking about in our own cask selections, is this idea of context. And there's partly context. What did you drink before it? What are you drinking after it? Or what are you tasting before it? What are you tasting after it? But then also this idea of being at a festival and somebody comes along and they get, you know, a 10 mil pour or a 15 mil pour, and they're quick nose, quick mouth. I like it. I don't like it. I'd look for that. I wouldn't look for that. And you're kind of like, no, that's not the drinking experience. You know, that's the idea of a pour in a glass, sitting, relaxing, letting it breathe. I'm curious for you, as you're putting time into creating, and then you're perhaps at a festival and you have a quick pour, is there any way you've found to kind of expedite the process for the consumer, or is it just served with a caveat?
Ooh, that's a thinker.
Take your time. Take any gaps out in post. No
with
rush
this episode,
to
we're
have an
leaving
opinion.
all of the gaps in.
All of the gaps.
The longer the better.
Yeah, it's a good
to show that thinking was really happening.
Precisely. I don't think you can expedite, and this is. And I was listening to your episode with Jess, where you talked about, you know, mostly it was the ASC, you know, clearing up some questions there, and then you actually got talking about whiskey festivals, and it got me thinking, because I'm certainly not frontline whiskey festival at Compass Box. I do a reasonable amount throughout the year, but it's certainly not. You know, there are many other people in the company who do that very good work, a lot more than I do. But yeah, you can't really offer with a caveat. It's you accept that the context is okay. You've maybe had 20 drams before now, and actually there have been years at Compass Box where the whiskies we've been excited to release, I would suggest, have not shown at their best in the Whiskey Fringe or Whiskey Live Paris or wherever it is. Sure. But what we do find is there are certain people who like to sort of hang around with Compass Box, and they will come back for repeat pours. So it's interesting. They're kind of trying to sort of take context into their own hands a little bit. Because something I do find is that we don't necessarily want to create whiskies which sort of muscle their way to the surface in a whiskey show context, because that's just like everything up to 11. And again, as blenders, that's not really what we're there for. If that is your bag, then there are, you know, many producers who will be offering the cask strength, high intensity, this, that, and the next thing. We love those high strength, intensity, this, that, and the next thing, but we love seeing how it can bring something to a wider composition. And so what we do find though is that, and this is a classic at the Whiskey Fringe in particular, I started to notice guys who got like a full 3-day pass. And you would see them come in and they'd go around the glorious Mansfield Traquair and, out the back and up and down. And then they would sort of find a little seating area, which was not too far from our stand. And then every half an hour, they'd come over and go, could I have another one of those? So they had decided that, I've tried what I want, and now I'm about the drinking side of things. And so you're right, going back to Joshua's question about the blending process, we're revisiting what will ultimately become, limited edition 1 or, our next core range or even, next iteration of a Peat Monster, for example. We are tasting that whiskey repeatedly, to finesse, to really understand its shape and what it wants to be. And so we enjoy it when there are those festival goers or just, people buying from shops and wherever, who's like, I got that whiskey into my glass 15 minutes in. I was like, I'm transported. I loved it at, minute 2, but I started to notice at minute 15 that something new was coming to the surface. And that's always fun because, we try and cram as many layers as we can into our whiskies. And, hey, there are many different ways to get the most out of a whiskey festival, as you guys were discussing 30 minutes to go, guys, on your bikes. But Compass Box, it's always about trying to make sure that there is as much compelling character as possible, and sometimes that means that a really punchy previous pour is just going to mask some of that character, but it is there. And however, whenever that person wants to know a little bit more, we'll be at another whiskey festival. Maybe you didn't enjoy it in August, but maybe you'll love it in November. Here all year. So there's different places to catch people on their journey. But the last Whiskey Life Paris I was at, I was pouring. What was I pouring? I think it might have been, someone might have approached the stand and I was about to pour them Orchard House. And even from 2 meters away, I was like, have you just had a Hamden? And they're like, oh, yeah. Should I, wash that glass out a good few more times. Because, that's not going to give you the full experience. It is what it is.
We just, a couple of days ago, had a cast sample that both Josh and I, once we poured that and rejected it, unfortunately, had said, I don't know if we can use that glass ever again. Let alone rinse it out a few times. It's like, nope, that glass is now just going to get buried in the garden. That is the end of its life.
Half-life.
I've got a two-parter that we can really kind of delve into. You're mentioning, as we're going along here, James, about core range. And as a known blending house with annual releases and special releases, even as a customer who follows Compass Box and obviously loves his Glasgow blend, it's never been obvious to me, and this clearly can be my own failing as a consumer, it's never been obvious to me that Glasgow blend is core. I'm always waiting on the announcement that, well, we've had some fun with Glasgow blend and it will be discontinued. And so one part of my question is, how do you walk that fine line between core and letting consumers know what's core and letting consumers know what is special? And then, as you were also saying a moment ago, the last 12 months have been difficult, the last 18 months have been difficult. How do you then look forward in how Compass Box will respond to that new industry normal? So that's my multifaceted. Core, how's it identified and presented? Special releases, how do they all fit in? And how do you see the future as you're trying to bring the consumer along for the ride?
I love that question because fortunately there is an answer. And I think what you've just shared with us, I'm not just here to waffle. There are some green shoots. We've been working on stuff, guys. Trust us. Yeah. So what you've just painted for us,
an important person, damn
it. what you've just shared with us, Jason, I think is writ large throughout most people who encounter us, and if even your good self, who has been to the offices, interviewed John and myself, drank our whiskies over the years, if it's not obvious to you, and that is potentially a barrier to accessing what we do, then it's probably going to be an issue for a much wider group of people. And so we have, over the last 2 years, really sort of tried to tackle this head on, because again, we have some external investment, and both they and we are really keen to get in front of more people. And we've talked about it being like the dating scene. Don't know how you guys were on the dating scene, but maybe no comment for me for sure. But I think we've always known that if we can get someone to a 5th date with Compass Box, or if somebody organises 5 of their own dates with Compass Box, they're probably going to be with us for life. But are we really good? Do we have our first date game in the bag? And we've all sort of had this discussion, and there is so much to sort of draw people in to Compass Box. Our labels are very kind of extroverted and interesting, and obviously you try the whiskies and you can clearly see, we hope you can clearly see, the work that goes into making those. But it's like, shit, where next? And I think it can be a little bit opaque for people, and it's like, no, this is great, you want more of this, right? And well, yeah, and so it's just taking people on a journey that they feel they can control a little bit more, where the signposts are clearer. And so we are going through a process where the labels are being streamlined effectively. The structure is consistent. The name Compass Box is more prominent. I think currently people know the Peat Monster, people know Glasgow Blend, and actually Compass Box as the producer is a secondary element that maybe is missed. So we're trying to make sure that people are going hunting for Compass Box first and foremost, and if they fall into a peaty camp, then they're going to love the Peat Monster. If they love a fruity style, then it's going to be Orchard House. So that's what we want. We want to make it a lot easier for people to navigate, and so over time, potentially as well, we want it to be easier for our sales teams and our distributors and all the people who do great work for us. It's like, here's this great brand, Compass Box. Oh, great! I'm a retailer in wherever. What should I carry? Because I can't have all 7. So it's deciding what are we putting forward in the most focused way, and that's obviously going to take quite a bit of time to bed in, but we are starting that journey. And so the limited editions will look different. What we're hoping for is to price them at a really consistent level. So there's going to be different kinds of limited editions that are doing different things for us, but fewer of them. I think this is the other aspect as well that can create really a lot of confusion. Is we've done so many interesting, fun whiskies over the years as limited editions, but if your experience of us as a brand is walking into a bricks and mortar retail store, and not even that, if you're browsing online and you type in Compass Box, there are the 7 core range whiskies, and then there's a whole heap of everything else, and the relative weighting. I can totally see how somebody would go, oh, Compass Box is all about these limited editions. They're the ones sort of grabbing all of the eye attention, and we want to address that balance as well. So there will be fewer overall releases coming out each year, just to try and make sure that the core range is getting the focus that it really deserves, because a lot of work, as I say, goes in, and they all do very specific, delicious things for different flavor profiles. And I still think flavor is a really powerful way to engage people. And so, making it clear from the bottles themselves what sort of flavor experience people can expect, whether they are a seasoned whiskey drinker or just exploring Scotch for the first time, it's definitely gonna help.
I also think about the changing landscape since John created this in 2000, right? Like, now we live in a world where every OB, every bricks and mortar producer has a core line and then a series of special releases. And so I don't think it necessarily needs to be a sole failing of Compass Box that they've got too many special whiskies. It's that everybody has got a line of special whiskies. Yeah. And as a consumer, you're just simply snowed under by, here's another series of new releases this week and next week and the week after that. And that's not just a Compass Box problem. That's an industry situation where we're all trying to come to terms with what are we offering, how are we offering it, and how are we communicating to the consumer.
Yeah, very much agreed. And I don't know whether for you guys it's, I hate to use the word easier, but because you are dealing almost exclusively with the single cask, it's like that's what we do. So yeah, this is going to come and go. It doesn't matter if we'd love it. Obviously it sells through really, really fast, but it doesn't matter if this cask of Linkwood is around for a while because we're constantly moving in and out of stock. But I know there's challenges for what you do as well.
I would say, on one hand, yes, that becomes easier. On the other hand, it just presents different problems, which is when you release your second and third and fourth Linkwood over 2 years, 3 years, 3 different markets. And people say, oh, your Linkwood, yeah, I've had that one. Like, no, you had that cask 2 years ago. Like, oh, so what's this one, and what's different about it? Well, everything's different about it. So, it's a different set of problems. It's just different ways to communicate with the consumer.
Yeah, Jason, you basically asked my question, which is fantastic. I wanted to touch on core and how you thought about it, and it's clear you're reshaping how you think about your core, and that's going to be really exciting to see as you roll that out.
Do you want to name the core? Since we've got you here and we haven't necessarily identified the core, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and say Glasgow Blend is one of the core.
So the core range as it stands is, yes, Artist Blend, Glasgow Blend. Got Orchard House, Peat Monster, Spice Tree, Story of the Spaniard, and then Hedonism, which was our very first whiskey that we ever created. That has been core for a long time. However, as of February this year, we have relaunched Hedonism effectively, given it a slightly new positioning, what we call a limited annual release. So we're going to continue to make Hedonism, but again, thanks to those spreadsheets, I know that we could not have continued to make Hedonism to the scale that we were doing. And so, yeah, let's safeguard some of those stocks. Let's make sure that we can do something really, really tasty, true to the sort of original ethos of hedonism, which is just that, the abundant pleasures that grain whiskey of that kind of maturity and style can offer. So yeah, it's still there every year, but it definitely won't be on shelf in the same way, depending on how each annual batch goes. But yeah, it's. We also sort of face that problem, therefore, of like, okay, well, this is 2024 and this is now 2025. What's the difference? Why should I care? And so, yeah, we're redesigning. We're working with different artists, different female artists every year to sort of give a different look to the original sort of hedonism lady's head, done in these different styles. So yeah, there's an artistic. Reason to collect, as well as the whiskies will be, hedonism is one of those ones where the recipe can change wildly, but we're looking for a very specific flavor profile. And actually going forward, making hedonism a limited annual release, there is that scope for myself as a whiskey maker to do a few riffs, just see how far we can stretch that style a little bit while still making sure it's obviously delicious and really sort of delivers on that classic grain whiskey character.
Yep, understood. Would you mind, Joshua, if I maybe asked another question on both of our behalfs?
Okay, I did have one in the chamber, but you do you. But I'm not gonna not ask this question. Is what I'm saying.
Okay. So I'm gonna bring my questioning to a conclusion with this one, which is internally, You are perhaps one of the most quoted people around Single Cask Nation who has no kind of employment within these chambers. But you had written into us and coined the term SCN Cinematic Universe. And we cannot have you on One Nation Under Whiskey for an entire episode without asking you. I'm not asking you to wax lyrical about Single Cask Nation, but
feel free to, though.
You.
Yeah, I'm sure I could.
The difference between an American and a Scottish approach. But do you have some aspect of that cinematic universe within your own endeavours within Compass Box? And I know you have alluded to it a little bit around this interview, but are there other places beyond blends returning to the casks from whence they have come? Are there other aspects of that around Compass Box?
Yes. I think when it comes to flavour profiles themselves, there is the opportunity for cameos to occur. So what would be a good example? I think
cameos. Oh, I like that. You just dropped that in very nicely.
So
certainly done.
I once created an infographic, which there's a publication here in the UK which has the rather memorable title of Delayed Gratification. But they love their infographics, and they did one for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which character appears in which films, so you can start to see, the frequency of different performers. And it got me thinking about the casks or the parcels from specific casks that we've used. And so something like a Kalila, 1984 would show up in Tobias and the Angel, which we released in 2019. It also featured in the 2015 version of Flaming Heart. Some of those, one of those casks also went into Velacor, and then actually Velacor, one of the remnants was used in Mike Miller's 30th anniversary Delilah's. So you can start to see how those little cameos play out. But I think even more than that, I think there's a vibe. No, I hate the word vibe. Let's think of another.
No, I love that. I didn't think James Saxon was going to say a vibe today. This is cool.
What I'm getting at is like there's the germ of an idea which we might express in one limited edition, but that idea might sort of come back and be reconstituted and sort of evolve. Maybe there's the dark side as well, and so I'm thinking of like experimental grain whiskey, which we were able to source some coffee still distilled peated malt from Loch Lomond, and so we combined it with some really interesting older grain whiskies. So it had this immediate, mossy sort of old books kind of quality, which on top of this really sweet, soft, extravaganza of aged grain. And so it's like, is this hedonism? Is this not? Very much the venom to the Spider-Man. It was a really fun way of doing that. And so, certain ideas, certain ways of framing a fruity single malt, a dry peated blended Scotch, all of these different ways can be reconstituted into different things moving forward. So no, we don't have any figurines in the office, but give it time.
That's awesome. I love that idea.
That's great. So the final question that I had for you referred to yourself as a whiskey maker. I've heard Compass Box and yourself, John, other people in the blending team, 3 terms being thrown around: whiskey makers, blenders, and independent bottlers. And I'm curious which term you think fits Compass Box the best and why.
Yeah, I know David Stirk visited the office last year actually to interview John for his fantastic book. It's a brilliant read. So we were super thrilled to be asked. But yeah, we've kind of felt a little bit like, maybe this is just me, but as much as I love independent bottling and have loads of them in the house, Compass Box as an independent bottler, I can see the logic, but it doesn't feel quite right somehow.
Gotcha. It's like that puzzle piece that almost fits but doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know whether that's because we've only ever done one single cask, or we never really bring to market whiskies which just have the specifics. Where I don't know why you can change the definition of independent bottling, or you can see how widespread it is. But yeah, we would always sort of cleave to whiskey makers first and foremost. I think as well, it sort of really fits with where I think the company is right now. Where I know for me, it's really important that whether you are actually blending the whiskey itself, or whether you are making that whiskey a really compelling proposition for a retailer in Singapore, you are making that whiskey. You are making that whiskey real in a way that we want it to really be engaging. And so I quite often talk about blending and being a blender, because I think that if you're part of the Compass Box sort of mission and collective, you should consider yourself a whiskey maker as well. Everything that you're doing is making whiskey happen. And so, I sort of, the official title is whiskey maker, but the easiest way for me to get people to understand what it is we're doing is like, well, I'm the blender. They are, creating the assets, as we call it, for the launch, but they're also making that whiskey. They're showing you a different side to what we've done here. And so, we are whiskey makers. Myself, I probably do cleave more to the blending side. Absolutely see how we can be classed within the independent bottler sphere as well, which delighted to be included in. And so, I hope that answers your question in different ways.
It does. Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Well, with any good friend, the conversation could go on and on. I have more questions in the chamber, but instead of a future half episode with you, or even a future one episode with you, maybe the next time we'll have 1.5 episodes with you at the same time.
Yeah, no counting elephants. That'd be very exciting.
Until next time, James Saxon, this has been an absolute blast. Thanks ever so much.
Yeah, thank you, gents. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Sincere thanks to James for joining us for a full interview there. As we discussed in the interview and as we suggested in the intro to today's episode, there's somebody who lived in a partial episode, who we came to the realization of, we really need to get James on for a full episode. Yeah. So I think it fits quite nicely within today's episode of, here's a larger stage. Here's a fuller conversation to be had. And that was as much fun as I thought it was going to be walking in there. Yeah. And to talk about that Chris Riesbeck question, which is taking on a little bit of a life of its own with some industry friends who have been texting us to further that conversation. This idea of experimentation is not the same as innovation.
Yes.
Really cool. That's really informing season 8 and some of the interviews we're having in season 8. So thoroughly enjoyed that. Cheers to James.
The conversation aside, what I liked about this episode is, in a way, it was a bit of a callback to our conversations with Sam Simmons and Lucas Denoyak in the sense that, we were all bloggers together, right? James was Whisky Odyssey. As a blog where he would ride around his bike from distillery to distillery to distillery and you know, following his journey. So it's nice to sort of bring the alumni back every now and again and have a conversation with them and just, you know, hear them talk about these new chapters of their lives. And we all started
remarkable.
off as bloggers, right?
Absolutely. I think that aspect is so cool. And I very nearly brought up the bloggers blend to James. And trying to remember if he was one of the ones included in it. And I have a sneaking suspicion he was, but I don't have a list of who participated. Is that a thing you might have?
I happen to have a bottle here in my hand, and there are... That, you know, we had the Whiskey Roundtable, you know, much larger group of people who would join us in these conversations. And on the back of the label, it's not a complete list. It's definitely an incomplete Joshua Hatton list, but we'll call it an incomplete Master of Malt list. And it is Edinburgh Whiskey Blog, Jewish Single Malt Whiskey Society, which was the old name of my blog, which became Jewmalt. Then it was Cask Strength Whiskey. Whiskey for Everyone, Whiskey Connoisseur, Guid Scotch Drink.
Phew. I was getting worried there. I was quite far down the list there.
Dr. Whiskey.
Yep.
Whiskey Cast. And then finally, this one's a tough one to read. It was the WWW.
Yeah.
Forum?
Yeah, that was Mark Connolly's forum.
What did the WWW stand for?
Whiskey.
Not the World Wrestling...
You backed yourself right into a cul-de-sac on that one.
Yeah, so Scotch Odyssey was not in this. So there you go.
Wow, with all due respect to Mark, I did not remember Whiskey Cast being in that.
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me who was a part of it, I would have said Jason for sure, Sam Simmons for sure, right? The Edinburgh Whiskey blogs like Lucas Denowiak, Chris Hoban.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, no offense to them, this was 2009-ish.
15 years ago.
Right? Like, it's okay that we don't remember. Maybe it's 2010, right? Like, it makes sense that we would not remember everybody that was on that list.
Oh, yeah, it couldn't have been 2009. You didn't have a blog in 2009.
Starting February 8th of 2009 is when I had my blog.
This is constant from you. That is incorrect.
Wait a second. I thought that I used to say 2008, and you're like, it's not 2008, it's 2009.
You consistently get it wrong.
So it's 2010. Okay, so there you go. Anyway. So there you go.
Thanks to James.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
No, he's a good lad, and I really like the fact that we were able to talk very honestly about core lineup, special releases, right? Where do things fit, and what's the future hold, and how do you communicate with the consumer, and how do you stay true to your blending vision, and how do you balance spreadsheets, and how do you make sure you've got stock coming in? It's really cool, and because one of the things we've always talked about this being an industry podcast. Back in the day, it was an industry podcast. Now it's an industry podcast. And this idea of kind of taking a peek behind the curtain, and it is so easy to look at the whiskey industry and think, gosh, I'd love to be involved in whiskey day in and day out, and I'd love to be doing all that tasting. I'd love to be putting some flavors together. And it's a wonderful part of the job, but it's only that. It's only a part of the job, and stocks and spreadsheets and financial planning and financial projections and consumer purchasing habits and emerging markets It's all part of the process.
Yeah.
Even down to marketing, communicating. It's a lot. The liquid whiskey is a small part of the much larger liquid whiskey industry.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Always.
This is
That's the thing you hate the most about your job.
This is the well. This is a piggyback off of Mark Watt's question. If you knew the whiskey industry was mostly not liquid, but all the other stuff that goes with it, would you have started an independent bottling company with me?
Man, there's taking a peek behind the curtain and then there's just ripping it off its hooks and fully exposing the man behind the curtain. The answer is yes. Yes, I would have still started an independent bottling company with you. And I would maybe have taken more interest or given more commitment to the other sides of it, right? The other spreadsheet sides to it, and maybe understood or maybe accepted sooner that liquid was a smaller part of the overall enterprise. Same question to you since we've ripped the curtain off its hooks.
Yeah, I think the easy answer is yes. The easy answer is without a doubt yes. The times when whiskey becomes difficult is when it becomes a SKU, like an SKU, a part number, right? A product to be selling. And I think as much as I enjoy that from a salesperson's perspective, this is not to say anything bad about Impex at all, but the Impex role was very much a salesperson's role. Yeah. And while I loved and love all of the distilleries that they worked with, it very much was a salesperson's role. And with Single Cask Nation and being now completely tied to SCN, and increasing the amount of logistical stuff that's being put on my plate and, now increased customer service that I'll be, working on, it's still filling a whiskey hole that I need filled. Like it's scratching that itch of curating, of bottling and sharing the stuff that we fall in love with.
And that's it.
Right.
That's what it all comes back to. And all of the spreadsheets and all of the emails all come distilling down, dare I say, to what's in the bottle and what's being shared.
Yep.
And that's true for you, for me, for Jess, for Steve, for the rest of the artisanal family. It's nice to know that still lives at the heart of the enterprise.
Yep. The passion is still there, right? So
I will say, however, talking about business, better go wake up the paper boy.
Extra, extra! Read all about it. Life story of Playboy Penny. Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it. Me and that Playboy in trouble.
The day this episode drops is May 15.
Correct.
And we have made the announcement to the nation that after listening, we are always listening. And I mean that in a very non-creepy way, in a very, passionate love of the nation way. Just made it creepier. We have made free shipping available to the nation for the first time.
Right.
Boom.
Beauty.
We have always been proud of our flat rate shipping fee. Mm-hmm. Somewhat recently, we just talked about the addition of expedited shipping.
Yes.
For an increased fee. Mm-hmm. And now here we are able to offer free shipping. And You know, this curtain is off its hooks, right? When we announced the acquisition, when the nation heard, the nation said, will the flat rate shipping fee remain? Will the flat rate shipping fee increase? Well, how about if you spend $300, there's no flat rate shipping. It's free shipping. How about them apples? How you like us now?
How you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now?
I think it's important to point out, in addition to the free shipping, that come June 6th, we're going to be releasing 6 new American bottlings. And even though we brought them up in last episode, I'd like to reiterate what those are. And I'll go in alphabetical order here, right? A Balcones American Single Malt, 4-year-old, and that's Golden Promise barley. That is a very specific heritage barley.
Hey, well done.
And that one's at 64.15% alcohol, so that's proper ABV. Well, not proper, but you know what I mean. Like that one grabs the American whiskey lover's attention. Follow that by our 7-year-old Black Button Bourbon, 51.1% alcohol. And really quickly, 161 bottles on the Balcones, 124 bottles on the Black Button. And then we follow that with the Catoctin Creek Rye, 3 years old, all 3 years in an ex-barley wine cask. Mm-hmm. That is 56.8% alcohol with 118 bottles. 118 bottles, Jason.
Yeah, these numbers are all very, very low.
And then we've got an MGP 7-year-old wheated bourbon.
There you go.
Every bourbon we've released to date has been high rye. This is a wheated bourbon.
Do we have a bigger number on that one?
Yeah, we
bigger
got
outturn?
141 bottles.
Gosh, it's barely.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, it's a bigger number. 55.45% alcohol. And then 2 more for you. We've got our Westland 9-year-old from a Sauterne cask.
Oh, selected by nation members at the distillery.
25 nation members came to the distillery to help us select that.
Boom, boom.
All 9 years in Sauterne, unpeated. It's their 5 malt, blend of malts for their single malt. 52.3% alcohol, 176 bottles. And then finally, our Wilderness Trail Rye. This is our first Wilderness Trail.
It is.
4 years old, 56.35% alcohol, and 212 bottles. The last thing that I'll say is 5 of these 6 bottlings are below $100 each. We're going anywhere from $60 to $95, depending on the bottling. And then our Westland, which is always the same Westland price.
Our standard pricing.
$125 for that bottling. We'll have some bundles up for sale, along with some free shipping. You will have seen it in your inbox by now, or on our Facebook page. And
this reminds me of last year, beginning of last year, when we had a celebration of the nation. And I really feel like since we made the announcement in January, it's all conversations have been around the nation. Yeah. What can we do for the nation? What can we do with the nation? Yeah. How can we supply the nation? Mm-hmm. And so this, to me, to my ears, sounds like another celebration, but in perpetuity.
And I would argue that these 6 releases are a celebration of American spirits.
Ah, right? Well said.
I mean,
well said.
This is June. We'll be a month away from the 4th of July, right? This is a perfect time to spring into summer with some great American whiskeys. Release 6 bottlings on June 6th. I'm really excited for this.
Absolutely. Yep. 6 bottles on the 6th day of the 6th month.
Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends his beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let he who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast. What is a human?
Wait, it sounds like Geddy Lee around here.
No, Bruce Dickinson. Yes, the Bruce Dickinson.
I've always said, and I'm going to say this because I don't think we're going to get him on the podcast, but I've always said that Geddy Lee sounds like a primo dungeon master out of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, 100%.
Every time he comes on, I always tell my kids, like, oh yeah, there's your dungeon master right there. They're both D&D kids, so they told me.
There you go. All right.
They dig it. There is the news. What a wonderful bit of news. That's why I wanted you to go wake up the paperboy there. I felt like that was essential. Celebration of free shipping and some excellent American spirits, and I'm pleased to say bottles remain on the website as well to pull for the nation as well. So let's keep it going here. We're having fun in 2024.
There you go. Well, beauty. So let's do a couple things before we get out of here. I want to let people know about our next guest coming up, and that's going to be Ian Sturzman, who's the master distiller at MGP.
Look at that.
Really excited about that. And I don't want to give away too much, but we will have a special guest joining us as part of that podcast. And I think it's going to align perfectly with our whiskeys coming up, our American spirits, which will include that 7-year-old wheated bourbon. And I just want to remind people again, like you did earlier in the episode, is please email us, info@singlecasknation.com for now, until we do that one for now. Once questions at One Nation Under Whiskey is up and running, we'll let you know. And then I just want to remind people to spread the word. If you like this podcast, let people know that you like it. Tell everybody. Tell them in person. Share an episode. Go to Apple Podcasts and give us a nice review. And
please,
if you give us 5 stars and you say some nice commentary, we'll be sure to read it out, call you out by name, all of that stuff. And that's it. That's all I got. Oh, you know what? That's not all I have. I want to thank James Saxon once more, because it was absolutely brilliant catching up with him and learning about Compass Box, where they've gone, where they're going, and I'll tell you, that magic cask. I'm going to show you this bottle quickly, Jason. So I opened that bottle of magic cask when we were talking with James, and later that day, my friend Bill came over, and that is what we did. We drank through half a bottle together.
Hashtag please drink half the bottle responsibly.
He had a ride and I was home, so there you go.
There you go. Good golly gosh. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad it was enjoyed.
Yes.
Good whiskey is for enjoying.
And I'm saving some for you, so when we're together next.
Thank you. The week after this episode drops, we're in Austin together. Are you going to bring any to Austin?
Well, spoiler alert, yes.
Yes! Ba-boom!
All right.
And we will have plenty to report from our Austin travels once we return. So listen out for an Austin update in the next episode.
There you go. Looking forward to it. On that note, cheers to you. Cheers to James. Cheers to the listeners. Cheers to Jason finding a glass so that he can clink and have a proper cheers. He's just looking around like he doesn't know where he is. Who am I? How did I get here? Where's the glasses to cheers with?
Cheers.
Cheers.